You want to look at it, he was responsible for, I mean, Tinubu was responsible for, it's known that he made him what he became political. I mean, if you look at his political career, you will give credit to him. So we're saying that, this whole loyalist kind of system still continues. Well, at the end of the day, you also find the person who has an interest in the state and wants to control what, because that's what politics is about. Who controls the resources, the state resources, who gets what at what time and at what point. But really, I don't think this is for the interest of the masses, but quite sad. And we hope that we get to a point where, the masses will determine who becomes, the governor of a state, and not necessarily having political godfathers. I understand that it's democracy, but we're saying that a select few persons, I mean, some persons, they are the elites. They have been put in this class. They are the kingmakers, the power brokers, as you want to call them. They sit down and they forestall who they want, to put in the system. And that's because there's an agenda. When you have this person, you already know that he that pays the piper will dictate the tune. And so that's what happens. They begin to do their biddings. And so you see policies that at the end of the day do not reflect the interest of the people. And this has constantly crippled, the entire economy and the political system. I mean, look at Osun State. You will not say that they're not, they're without no troubles. And how come Aregbesola is calling, Bola Ahmed, because he said that he doesn't want the interest of Osun people. But does he really care about the Osun people? I mean, how far has he spoken all the while? But, well, we definitely need to move on. And what next are we going to be looking at?
So we look at how that moves on. But we also monitoring a story regarding a village that was burnt down in Kaduna by a suspected militia. And, of course, if you've been following what's been happening in Kaduna, especially southern Kaduna, we've been seeing sort of an ethnic conflict over there. With hundreds of lives being lost. Last week or so, I mean, the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, did come out to decry the amount of people who have been killed, the number of lives, let me say, better put, lost in the clashes and the attacks in southern Kaduna. The governor also said, something urgently needs to be done because it's not normal. The statistics we've seen, even if one life is lost, it's also really sad. They're suspected to be Fulani militia, and I say this with a heavy heart because, we always try to downplay the ethnic side of things, but that is the report we're having. And something needs to be done to really get to the bottom of this. It can't continue forever. So these suspected militias, last night, we're told, attacked, or 2 nights ago, rather, attacked the Apia Babum village in Atiap Chiefdom in Zangon Kataf local government area of Kaduna State, burning all the houses after killing 3 persons. Burning all the houses after killing 3 persons on Sunday night. A source from the village said that the suspected, the suspected militia members fled but returned on Monday night in their large numbers to burn down the entire village. And it's really sad. Almost all the people in the village, we're told, will have to manage sleeping outside their homes, pending when they're able to put up structures that they can rely on. It's really unfortunate what's happening in Kaduna State. And we need to have a sense of what is going on. Because we hear bandits, we hear herdsmen, now we're hearing militia. So what is going on? There should be some sort of explanation from the security agencies to say, okay, this is who these people are, what is going on. Because, I mean, reports are coming in from people on the ground, reaching out to the media, this is what's going on. But we can't connect the dots, We can't connect the dots.
I would say that we haven't been very sincere with the fight against insurgency. We haven't been very sincere with the protection of lives and property, which should be and which is, the core mandate of every government across the globe. It's the primary responsibility. It's the reason why government exists, as an entity. The reason why we have has never been argued for, as a plus or a merit in any system. That's why you have government, because government needs to provide order. Government needs to protect. You can't allow people to take laws into their hands. People can't act anyhow because there would be, and that's why the system, that's why government exists. And in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, it is clearly stated, Section 14, if I'm not mistaken, it talks about the reason for protection of lives and property, which would include, to what extent? So it's really worrisome whether or not it's militias, whether they are bandits, whatever it is that they call themselves, the thing is lives and properties are not protected.
Absolutely.
And so you will find that the argument would be who controls the security architecture of, the country. You want to talk about the police. Of course, it's in the exclusive because it's sensitive. And that people have constantly said, okay, let's devolve the powers. Let's, share the responsibility and have the state government have control over the police architecture. But it feels like, it is what we can see. You have the police whose primary responsibility is to ensure that there's protection of lives and property in a civil society, in a civil. So that's the responsibility of the police. And the question is, where are the police officers? What's the Nigerian police force across the entire country? In Kaduna State, don't we have police officers? What about the joint task force? There are several joint task forces that we've had over time. Combination of different government has set up everything. What is going on? What is the state government doing? The state governor cannot say there's nothing they can do because it's already looking like a helpless situation. That's what it seems right now. And it feels like this category of persons, the militia, the bandits, the Boko Haram, have empowered the Nigerian state, and so we're so helpless, and there's really nothing that we can do. And some quarters have said, let's begin to take up arms to protect ourselves, because it feels like the government has actually failed. And the argument where you have governors saying, oh yes, we can't be responsible because we do not control the security architecture is a big excuse. As a chief security officer of your state, the primary responsibility, your concern should be about the protection of lives and properties. And if not, then let's get a better explanation to what happens with the security votes that's been gotten. So there's no sincerity in the fight against all of this. The president, on the other hand, people have said that, constantly they say he's treated some of these issues with kid gloves. He's not been very, harsh. You can't see any sincerity in the fight against the security. And so we constantly just forward the arms and then we're waiting for a miracle to happen that can never happen because there's always a human part to every miracle. So it is so sad that every day the lives of Nigerians do not mean anything to anybody, including the governors of this state. And we wake up and we make excuses. So what is now the fate of the Nigerian people? Where do they now run to? That every day lives are being killed, lives are being taken. And these persons constantly pay taxes. It's so sorry. So, I always feel that Nigerians should be paid. I just feel like being a Nigerian is a lot of job. It's a job that, you should be put on a salary scale. You should be earning salary for just being a Nigerian. It's so much to bear. Maybe I'm getting very emotional. I need to put my emotions in check at this point.
It's a sad situation in Kaduna State because almost it's just about 3 weeks ago when Governor Rufai of Kaduna State, he wasn't there in person anyway, but he was represented by a commissioner of his, had a security meeting with the village chiefs, traditional rulers, and community leaders from 2 local government areas, Kauru and Zango Kataf. The governor wasn't there, but when he spoke, he said, and this was a bombshell, and people started talking about it. And when people talk about Kaduna State, a lot of people don't really understand what's going on there. And people, just because of sentiment, just jump into it and start talking. That's why some of the headlines that we see, we have to be a bit circumspect and try to understand the situation. There's a lot of tension between the ethnicities in the area, and it's not just a one-way killing. It's both ways, you understand. But the governor said something which is really, really worrying. 387 people killed in 2 years in just these 2 local government areas, Zango Kataf and Kauru. And just barely 3 weeks, after the governor said that, we have this group of people going to Zango Kataf, village in Zango Kataf, LGA, and to burn all the houses there. And most times when these moves are made, it's reprisal. It means maybe they want to go back and revenge something. So the ethnic groups there are forming themselves into militias, into local armies of sorts, and attacking each other. So it's a situation that you ask, can't government do anything about this? When El Rufai, governor of Kaduna State, meets with the chiefs, traditional rulers, religious rulers, or leaders rather, and community leaders, and tries to appeal to them to be more tolerant of each other and not to continue the killings and counter killings, that they are unjustifiable. You see a governor who doesn't have the power to do much. You ask him, does he have power to do much more than just talk to the traditional religious and community leaders to sit down with them? Is there much more that because this is your state, you know? Also, some would say that the statements credited to the governor, his utterances and his body language may not have given people confidence, especially outside Kaduna State, that he is being fair or is being hands-on to solve this situation. Just like what's happening, not exactly what's happening in Benue State, but a bit of, the Benue government keeps talking and pushing the blame to the federal government. But the neutrality of El Rufai, some people have questioned that because of his statements. You know that northern and southern Kaduna are not just divided along ethnic lines, but also to a large extent religious lines. So you have Christians in Kaduna State as well. He is Muslim, So this suspicion has been there in the public. That's why people always dismiss what El Rufai says.
So for me, I totally understand that you have different kind of conflicts. So you have conflict from ethnic crisis, differences, and what have you. And that's why I say government exists. Government exists for this purpose, because these things will happen. Government cannot just wake up and say two ethnic groups are, so they're fighting. So don't we have the police? Don't we have system to resolve all of this? Don't we have system to resolve the conflict and boundary issues? We know that boundary and conflict and land issues would always arise. It has always existed, but we can't just act as if it's mission impossible. It is not mission impossible. I remember on this platform we've had a conversation right here, and I'm sure at that time you weren't here, where we spoke to different parties from these different communities. And then these persons you have this group of persons saying we're not, these persons kill our cows, we didn't kill them, or they did this and they did not do this. And you can hear people saying, oh, we did this or we're doing this because our cows were killed, they attacked us. The question is, mother is mother. Who are these persons committing this crime? And Kofi Bartels, to say that these people do not live, my question is, these people do not live in, it's like you have a family, but I'll finish up with that thought. These people do not live in a space. They don't live in space. They don't live in the moon. And even in the moon, people will actually go to the moon and go to space. So they can be found. So if you have different committees, perpetrating all of these crimes, committing murder, how come the security apparatus, the people who should make arrests, who should ensure that there's law and order, have actually failed in doing that? That's where the question lies. So we know that conflict would actually come from different issues. So this is a conflict where you have different tribes having this clash for whatever reason it is. But the law does not permit that you take the laws into your hands by killing another life. So if there's any grievances or any dispute or whatever, there's a system that this can actually be resolved. And so these persons who commit all of these crimes live in our society. We know them. They're our uncles, they're our brothers, but we have constantly tolerated them. And that's why we have emboldened all of this. I don't think it's an excuse when we say we don't know when we call the traditional rulers. At some point you begin to ask, because before we came an entity called Nigeria, we had a way of administering our government. We had a system where you had traditional rulers playing a major role, where you had peace in different communities, and where people, you had a system of policing where you had the youths and what have you. And so the role also of traditional rulers, we can't take that out entirely. So what are they doing in all of this? Is it that we don't know these people who are killing? If somebody has killed somebody, it's a crime in the law. The criminal code states that. And so the point is, the law, there's no implementation of the law. There's no arrest. People are not being arrested. Because somebody killed your cow does not mean you should kill another person. And so when you have the attacks and reprisal attacks, and then government is saying, oh, there's really nothing we can do, because that's what it feels like, and that's how it sounds like. We're helpless. And so let them continue the fight. So what's the essence of governance? So let all of us continue to fight. Imagine that there's some conflict, in the office, and you don't have a system, then you have to, probably take something and go very violent. That's what we were saying, that government has missed it.
Yeah, I think we'll have to move on at this point. It's a unfortunate situation in Kaduna State. If you have 387 people killed in just 2 local government areas, is it maybe not time for a solution, a hard-hitting solution? We know what happened in Plateau State in the time, I think, of Joshua Dariye as governor, and Olusegun Obasanjo as president. And maybe it's time for such a solution to be employed in Plateau State. it's time for politics in Kaduna State, sorry. It's time for politics to go out the window and the right thing to be done, which maybe as an emergency situation could be declared in, if it's just maybe these two local government areas, you understand, he declare and then quell the tension. This is not a situation that can be solved by arresting people, because it's whole communities and whole tribes against whole tribes. So you don't solve this problem by arresting people. You can arrest and you won't have space in the prisons. You have to de-escalate, call the leaders, sit them down and talk. Is it the leaders of these communities are not listening to the governor or not? Because he said that they should stop. He's met with them. And even though he didn't meet with them directly, but
de-escalation doesn't seem to solve the problem.
Is it that the message is not getting to them, or is that they're not able to talk to their youth to stop these killings? So I think maybe it's about time that an emergency situation is declared in that part of, at least, if not the whole of Kaduna State, that part. But hopefully, if such an emergency situation is declared, it's also will be necessary for the military to be impartial, to be neutral in that instance, because even some of the tribes of those who are involved in the killings, they have their kinsmen in the army. And it's not new to hear people complain that some soldiers are being partial to their brothers in conflict. So this is what they have to look out for. We do hope for the best and a resolution in Kaduna State. We have to move on. We have up next a look at what happened today in history. And of course, when we come back, we'll dive straight into what the national dailies have on their front pages in Of the Press. We'll be right back.
For upcoming artists to blow in Nigeria.
Welcome to Plus Trending. I am Bookie November, your host, saying thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Welcome back. It's tea time on PlusTvAfrica.
Practice makes perfect. I'm not perfect yet, but I'm a lot better than I used to be.
He's a king. He's entitled to marry 100 if he wants to.
In raising our kids, parents should stop playing God.
The internet is actually using the people.
But when you are looking for money to help other people, then it becomes easy.
Don't rush into marriage. I always say this. You rush in, you rush out.
Family is the bedrock of every society and the essence of life.
On Today with John and Helen, we dig deep into family values in every sense of the word.
Join us every Saturday at 9:15 a.m. on PlusTvAfrica, DSTV channel 408.
With you, we play a part in strengthening the values passed from generation to generation.
I had no desire to study law, none whatsoever. I was more inclined to fine arts. My only ambition, I would say, was to become the chief prosecutor. For me, politicians are a bit too playful. That's what I believe. And since '99, we've seen how much investment in social events, in launching some streets that you just started, and the whole day will be spent on this occasion. British people are generally law-abiding. We are not law-abiding. So another problem of administration is that people don't follow the rules.
Timeless Conversations, airing every Sunday at 8:30 p.m.
Welcome back to The Breakfast on Plus TV Africa. We're about to look at the pages of our national dailies, and we'll be having a guest join the conversation. Ezika Nyaitok is on standby. But let's look at the leadership. I start off with the leadership, and as always, the top stories would be the focus. The leadership newspaper this morning says fuel scarcity bites harder amid NMPC's assurance of 1 billion litres. And that's the reality, because you can see that if you live in Lagos and other parts of the country. I'm sure that you probably would have experienced the scarcity. Motorists, commuters stranded, keep vigil at fueling stations. Transport fares rise as 1 litre sells for 600 naira in Abuja. Lagos black markets. Scarcity may last for another 2 months, says Ipman. President didn't order query of the NMDPRA head. That's what the official is quoted to say. Interesting. And Bello Coco appointed a substantive MPAMD. You also have another header here saying $418 million Paris Club reforms. Federal government state no fate, March 25th. And just before we move away, you have 5 killed as IED explodes in Borno after ASU colleges of education and lecturers threaten strike. That's what you have. And you also have the FCTA to borrow 200 billion naira for road and water projects. Citing irregularities, President Muhammadu Buhari seeks amendment to the 2022 budget. And that's it this morning on the leadership.
Let's go straight to the front page of The Guardian, which says it is conscience nurtured by truth, with these headlines. The big one there: harder times loom as fuel crisis lingers. And you have the following riders to that. Inflation decelerates slightly to 15.6%. That's interesting. Data is mockery of market reality. Food crisis, such that if there is a national emergency, we can always resort to that stockpile. I mean, this situation shows that there may be no stockpile. You know, in countries that have forward-thinking, measures, they would have something kept somewhere, so that if there's an issue, situation, internationally, maybe the vessels are not able to supply fuel to their country since they don't refine, they can always, for some days, rely on that so that life and the economy doesn't come to a standstill, So they stockpile on food, they stockpile on necessities. If it's a country that doesn't have water, like Singapore, they can have a reservoir somewhere, and they stockpile on fuel. And these are the things necessary to keep a country going, even if you have to ration. Now, we have this situation, and the government has not been able to say, okay, we have a stockpile of fuel, we'll keep supplying the market, while we replace it with what is coming. So hearing that NMPC is importing 2.3 billion liters of fuel is okay, but the queues are still there. And you can see on the front page, the president is at the airport. He's being seen off by the Minister of Women Affairs and the FCT Minister as he's departing the country to Belgium, Brussels, Belgium, ahead of the EU-Africa summit. So there's a problem in the country, and the president has jetted out. You understand? So the Guardian did a good job of putting the picture of the president leaving the country, saying bye-bye. And you have a picture of the fuel queues in Abuja, I think. So did the president, drive to the airport? Was he airlifted to the airport? Did he see the queues? Is this the best time for him to leave the country? So questions I hope our analysts will be able to answer. What message does it pass to Nigerians here? The president is hopped on the plane again to go to another summit, in Brussels, when we have a national situation on our hands. In some countries, probably you'd see the vice president or the minister of foreign affairs being sent, just so that the public will see the president is concerned about the situation and is on ground to solve the situation. Why are Nigerians seeing the president going, to the filling stations to talk to people, to see what's going on, and it's just a situation that I hope our guests will be able to look into or talk about. More headlines from The Guardian. Emefiele reinforces commitment to Nigeria's economic growth, pledges loyalty to Buhari Nigerians. I do not know who these people are who were linking Emefiele's name with a run for the presidency, asking him to resign and join politics. I mean, that he could risk his job because the president here is, okay, my central bank governor is interested in politics, even though he's not said anything. If Emefiele doesn't come out to strongly deny that he's not interested in joining politics, it may be taken as he's actually, is the one behind that. So it's interesting. The man has had to come out to shout, "No be me, I'm not concerned. I'm committed to Nigeria's economic growth, and I'm loyal to President Buhari." And that's it. It's all right. Let's see how it goes. More stories from the front page headlines on the front page of the Guardian this morning. NDLEA replies police vows to prosecute officers indicted with Kyari. This back and forth between the Nigeria Police Force and the NDLEA. NDLEA saying, give us your man. He's wanted, and the police not doing anything. Later they had to address the press conference, and the police now being forced to do something. But saying, hey, you too, you have some people who are also indicted as well. We have more stories from the Guardian. Ex-PGF boss writes Buhari accuses Buni of planning to scuttle APC convention. PGF means a Progressive Governors Forum. Fuel scarcity. Buhari did not order query over bad fuel, says presidency. Now, that should be down to a source in the president. It's not an official statement from the one I read last night. It's sad, really. It's sad. And the man is out of the country as we speak. EFCC recovers 9 filling stations, lands others from serving military officers. You need to see the list. Mercy, your home state, Cross River State, has some of those property. Long list. And 5 children abducted from their homes in Rivers. Really sad one. But these are headlines coming on the front page of The Guardian.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper this morning. The bold caption says, Abba Kyari's brother received 279 million naira from Hush Puppy others. This is according to police report. You have riders. The first says, Nigerian police force probes Kyari for 33 cases of money laundering. Police recommends demotion for embattled top cop. And that's it. They're boldly written. Fuel subsidy. Federal government states set for a showdown over planned 950 billion naira FAAC deductions. APC convention shaky. Buhari shuns governors and jets off to Belgium. I really don't know why that came out that way. Marketers resolve to blend dirty fuels and scarcity persist in states. And just before we move away, you also have top military officers forfeit 10.9 billion naira property to the federal government, EFCC, and shields identity. And you also are looking at the Oshogbo shootings. Police indict Aregbeshola's men, NSCDC casualty corps, and student demand sanctions. Olubadan designates salute Ibadan system and promises peace. And these are some of the headlines this morning on the Punch newspaper. And just before we move away, negative reports to tarnish Emefiele's image, says friends. That's it on the Punch.
It's quite interesting. This is some real drama. As the man said he wants to be president, people have come out. And he has
Did he say he wants to be president?
He's not said it, but it doesn't matter. These politicians can rely on people saying, no, because you said I should come out, I'll come out. But the man has come, the funny part for me is the man has come out to vehemently deny. But let's quickly move on because we have a guest standing by. On the front page of the Nation newspaper, the bold headline there, Buhari governors meeting on hold. On APC convention fails to hold. President gets list of chairman aspirants. Uzodima, the party can shift convention if necessary. Petrol subsidy spending put at 2.55 trillion naira. 139 lawmakers' projects to be deleted from budget. Aregbeshola's thugs fired gunshots without provocation, says police. Osun government urges president to caution minister. Students protesters NSCDC office. That's what you see playing out there in Oshobo. Gunshots being fired because of this whole situation. Olubadan to be craves for younger monarch in future. ICPC blocks 189 billion naira unspent funds in MDAs. House invites government officials. Bala Osman removed as NPA MD for insubordination. This has been a long, winding one between the Minister of Transportation, Rotimi Amechi, and the MD of the NPA. Kwara government, how Shonga project was diverted. It's been one between Kwara government and Isaki, former governor of the state as well. Politics at play. Inyaitok, expert analyst on Off the Press this morning. Mr. Inyaitok, good morning to you and thanks for joining us. All right, Mr. Inyaitok, can you please check your connection to see if you've unmuted yourself so that we can hear you, because we cannot hear you right now. If you've unmuted yourself, you can just give us a thumbs up so we know. Okay, and also please try and centralize your camera for us. Good to know you're joining us this morning. Let's start with the fact that the president was not able to meet with the governors on the APC convention, and the president, amidst the
summit, came as a surprise shock or something that just like popped up, you know, an emergency. Each of these programs has been scheduled for a long time, and Mr. President did not have an emergency where he had to jet out. There is the itinerary of Mr. President that is known to the governors, and there's the political calendar that is known to the president. I think that is a one more case of APC just believing that so long as PDP is not giving them opposition, they have to make our democracy work by being their own very serious opposition. I can't understand what is going on, and the leadership of the party has been vested, as it were, on Mr. President. So just like the fuel matter, the fish rots from the head and the box stops on the desk of the head. And I'm really bothered about the people who are managing Mr. President, because they are just making us look like they are not taking the issue of governance and management. And when I say management, is general, because governance you are restricting to government, but management is generic, which goes into the party. And the APC, I really don't know why they actually think they should spend a day longer in office, because they're really not, they're not in. From all indices, these guys are just not interested in good governance, either of their party or of the nation or even themselves, because the extent to which they go to actually tear themselves apart just shows that whether it is personal or corporate or national, they just don't seem to be interested in anything called good governance and management.
All right, let's also look at the focus, the call by the umpire asking that the beavers, which is actually a technology that's been introduced for the election, be used for the Osun State election. If you look at the FCT election that happened, the beavers were also being used. And the people cry out the fact that these beavers did not function properly, and that also truncated the process, although you also have the authorities saying the beavers function to its maximum capacity. But what do you think about these beavers and the elections that we're going to have in Osun State, and also the 2023 elections? Are we really ready for these beavers? Because I remember in 2015, the introduction of the smart card readers. The smart card readers did not function, to the capacity that they should function. Some of the issues were that the personnel who should actually operate these devices were not properly educated, so they didn't have knowledge, issue of network and what have you. With this new technology, do you think we're really ready? Wouldn't we have this technology also disenfranchising a lot of persons?
Yes, and this reverses the way that we program it to drive. And the beavers is one of the best introductions, an improvement on the card reader. To that extent, Nigerians should not, for any reason, start to have conversation of whether or whether not. That should not be a conversation. The conversation should be, how do we ensure it works? Leaving the beavers out is completely out of discussion, completely out, because number one, we know that it's supposed to be an improvement. Number two, we know that technology derives from the way we operate it. What Nigerians, every well-meaning Nigerian, particularly the media, should do is interrogate the fifth colonists in the nation, because they want to drag us back. They want to bring us to the area of these people rigging elections, manipulating elections, and the highest level of manipulation is what they call incident forms. That is where you just pack in people that were not there. Look at the percentage turnout that we've been having. Some places 30%. It means that they have a 70% elbow room to manipulate. If two people go to vote, fine, that is democracy. Let it be decided by the two people that go to vote. But let nobody be disenfranchised. How can people be disenfranchised with technology? It is impossible. It is technology that drives our banking system. It is technology that drives every international relationship and organization. It is technology. And this technology is not localized. Technology is global. So let all women and men of conscience step in and look at the fifth columnist and look at the people who are trying to say, this is not working. They are trying to sell us a narrative that we should never, ever buy. We must put our eyes on the ball.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but let's look at this in this angle. As beautiful as that sound, and we understand, the importance of technology, and having that in our elections. But you have the fact that from the experience from the field, you have to be verified. There has to be some kind of verification before you are even being allowed to cast your vote. And in a case where you're unable to be verified, then there's no way you're able to cast the vote. And so that already, -1 vote already.
Mercy, my sister. Let me tell you something. You travel. There is no country you go to and you don't get verified by your face and fingerprints. There's no country you go to. None in the world. Facial recognition and verification is even your phone. Your phone has never malpracticed because you try to put in your thumb and it does not want to agree. What am I saying? The conversation should not be, number one, nobody should be disenfranchised. I agree with you. But are we stuck? No, we're not. We should apply the technology that is global and make sure nobody is disenfranchised, but we insist we are going to use the beavers. Let us go, the IT gurus, let us go and network with INEC today and see whether the technology that is adapted in the facial recognition of the beavers is defective, and upgrade it and update it. But it is not a conversation. It is not an alternative. It is not on the table for consideration that we will accept. That's what they are trying to drive the narrative. Oh, people should not. They want to even make us to as much as think of the possibility of jettisoning the beavers. It's not going to happen. It will not happen. Let us improve our technology. This is what is used all over the world. It's not like a new technology that we are saying it has not been tested. Facial recognition and fingerprints is global. So let us do the convention aspect. How do we get to INEC and interrogate that process early enough, which can be done? We have some of the best, most intelligent, brightest programmers and IT gurus in the world resident in Nigeria. That is why Mark Zuckerberg came to Lagos. These boys are there. I'm not even talking of big tech companies. That's why we're having the unicorns coming from Nigeria. So let INEC open up the window and let us not even have a conversation on whether or whether not. No. But we should improve it so that nobody is disenfranchised. That should be the conversation.
All right. At the back of our minds, we also remember that the Electoral Act Amendment Bill, the reworked version, is yet to be signed. Elections are meant to hold on February 18, 2023. We're inching closer to 365 days. We'll watch the space. Ms. Ezekiel, let's look at the story on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. At the bottom right corner of the Leadership newspaper, you have this headline: After ASU, Colleges of Education lecturers threaten strike. And this story referring to the Colleges of Education Academic Staff Union, COASU, saying that the federal government only knows how to respond to crisis and not to peaceful engagement. And they're threatening to go on strike over the failure of the federal government to implement an agreement reached between COASU and the federal government as far back as 2009. And this is coming 24 hours after ASU embarked on its own strike.
I'll tell you this. Number one, they're right. The government chose what they call lines of least resistance. Even in the housing policy, it is written clearly in the former one that the cries of the people woke up government. So government does not operate, unfortunately, in our climate on what is best for the citizen, bringing in the professionals in the industry who are passionate about their profession and who are compassionate about the people, so that they sit down and look at what is right to do. That's why the Bible says that righteousness, which is do rightness, exalts a nation. That's why we can have a Muslim country like that's just a simple thing. So I think that as we're starting to talk about 2023, Nigerians should move from the concept of big parties who can fund it to who is competent enough. I want them to bring Mr. Tinubu, Mr. Atiku, Mr. Moralo, Mr. Kwankwaso, Mr. Wale Adewale, Mr. Chukwuka, put them. Let Nigerians start to have a conversation of profiling their competence, their capacity, what they bring to the table, and relative to our primary. A man like Moralo can say, I've been an institution person for reforms, I've fixed countries in other climes. That is what I bring to the table. So I'm going to be that peace, reconciliation, focus heavy. A man like Alhaji Kwankwaso can say, I've been Mr. Education, look at my record in office and out of office on education. A man like Mr. Chukwuka can say, or Mr. Wale Adewale can say, I've been an entrepreneur, a private sector person that I've made good out of my... When each of what is Mr. Atiku saying? What is Mr. Tinubu saying? These are the conversations we should drive, and not which party they belong to, which is irrelevant.
I wonder why we didn't hear you include Mr. Nyetok in that list to also say, provide solutions to the country. But we have another story up next.
All right, so just quickly, let's look at this. More stories, more development as regards the Abakiari's saga. And so you hear the Punch saying Abakiari's brother received 279 million naira from Hush Puppy others, and the Nigerian police force probes Kyari for 33 cases of money laundering, and some people are asking, the police is asking that they recommend him for demotion.
You see, Nigerians are what you call the evil. A lot of Nigerians in office are what you call the evil genius. They know how to sell a dummy and a conversation. Have you noticed that very quickly, without you thinking, they are at all? Because initially, before the NDLE came up, you notice that the police said, oh, his case should be disposed of within the next few days or weeks, something like that. What was that supposed to be? I think NDLE got the way that these guys were going to get ahead of them. Then they came public and they put such a damning evidence out. Now it is either these people are trying to castigate an innocent Nigerian, or these people are saying, never again, we've had enough of that, let this guy first the music, whoever he is. At this point in time, Nigerians must stand on the side of justice, fairness, and equity by doing what? Send him to trial. If he's innocent, apologize to him. If he's guilty, he does the time.
So I was actually going to come to that, because the question would now be, where do we have the Court of Competence jurisdiction actually proving him innocent or guilty? Because according to the law, he's innocent until being proven otherwise.
That's correct. That's correct. They're trying to be smart by half. That's how they're going to do. The next thing you have to talk about plea back and all those things. It's not going to happen. Nigerians must rise up and say, do not castigate an innocent soul and do not free a criminal. That is our byline. And it goes to simple, go to competent court of law. All this media trial is absolute balderdash, and we should get out of it by now. Bring your case, you've established it, take it to a competent court of law, make it open. O.J. Simpson's case was made open and everybody was following the case. This is going to be a super cop. A super cop cannot be tried in one quiet place. No. In fact, let it become a media thing that the media can make a lot of money from and everything. Let it become something that just wakes up people, and at the end of the day, what you achieve if you're a strategic thinker and you mean well for the country is for you to show the common man that justice is blind and that equity is open to all. So you take him there, you put the evidence, we see the cops that are trying to act funny, we see them, we hear them, we see the judge that makes a judgment based on the evidence that is made available to the people, we see transparency, we see accountability, we see justice, and the day that pronouncement is made, we either lose confidence in our legal system or we say, thank God, a new dawn has begun for the Nigerian judiciary. One of the two.
Oh, wow. Mr. I took interesting one from you there. Let's quickly round up rather by going back to, because we talked about the president's absence from the country despite the accused. But regarding the fuel scarcity reports that is biting harder, for instance, on the front page of the leadership newspaper comes this headline: fuel scarcity bites harder amid NNPC's assurance of 1 billion liters. We're hearing, things like 1 billion liters, 2-point-something billion liters being imported into the country. I have asked a question, we've asked a question this morning before you came on, why we don't have a stockpile of fuel as an oil-producing country, a stockpile of crisis. No head is rolled till now. What do you make of how bad the situation has gotten? Yeah.
I'll tell you this. There was a lady, at first name Esther, I think Nandi or something like that. She was the head of PPMC, and she was unceremoniously removed from office. She had a hearing on the floor of the Senate that was very damning as to what was happening in our petroleum subsector. She brought up a case of where the stock that was left was being sold of records or things like that. Now what happened to her was appealed. She was removed. And that lady is still removed till today. And I expected Mr. President to call somebody like that woman and say, exactly what happened, tell me. If he means well for this country, you can't tell me we don't have a natural reserve. You can't tell me that, because even if nothing goes wrong, because we import fuel, there could be an international situation where vessels cannot come into a country. It can happen. It could be a war situation, even amongst others that block the route. So we are able to have a stockpile that we can deal with until the situation is resolved. Now, the situation at the end of the day, what do we have? We have Mr. President, who is the Minister of Petroleum. He's just absent, completely absent. Even in all these things, we haven't heard him say anything.
I mean, shouldn't a head have rolled by now? I mean, because we're looking at people like the NNPC, GMD.
Heads, please add plenty heads to that head. Heads should have rolled by now, because it's so important. Let me tell you the next risk that I'm looking at, and God help us. And that is people trying to play smart by mixing the adulterated with the new ones so as to bridge the gap fast. And what's going to happen is that the poor man is going to be worse off because his engines are going to get affected. Nobody's going to know what's going to happen. It's going to take maybe about 10 years for them to do a research, and that research paper might never come out, but we would have suffered innocently. Where is the transparent process of recall of all the bad fuel? Who is showing us to be transparent as they see what is being done? Who are people hoarding them in their tanks and then getting paid for them to have been removed? People being paid for nothing done, getting new fuel, mixing them up. What is the situation? Why can't we just care about the man on the street? I can afford, but how about my driver that just managed from so many years being given a vehicle and is using it to augment his salary by sending it as transportation, and now the engine knocks or something goes wrong? What is the fate of that man? Let's just for once think about the man on the street. We are two that are already dying. Their blood their cries will wake you up someday in the night. We need to wake up and have a little bit of a conscience in this country. It's getting out of hand. I can't take it anymore.
Interesting indeed. I think very important what you've just said, Ezekiel. We need to wake up because, of course, if the people do not wake up, things will continue to be the same. This is a situation where the regulatory authority has consistently, since this thing unfolded, lied to Nigerians about the situation, saying limited amounts of fuel. And the head of the agency is telling Nigerians he will not take responsibility and that this is just a small thing that will be solved in no time. It's a limited amount of fuel and nobody has been fired. He is still in a job. Anyway, we have to see what happens and hopefully Nigerians would do something about this to let the government know how they feel. Ezekiel Yatuk is a public affairs analyst. Thank you very much, sir, for giving us your expert analysis on the day's headlines.
Thank you. God bless you all.
And well, that's the size of it. We do appreciate your time, Ezekiel Yatuk. We look forward to having more of your thoughts on some national issue. We will take a breakdown and, of course, bring you and tell you what happened today in history, being the 16th day in the month of February. Please stay tuned.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Welcome to your favorite program, The Moment of Truth, brought to you by the Citadel Global Community Church. Our God is a God of salvation, far above all principality and power and might and dominion, that regardless of what happens in this season, you will escape. Say to your neighbor, there is no peace for the wicked. The lazy man does not roast what he took in hunting, but diligence is a man's precious possession. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might.
Moment of Truth with Pastor Tunde Bakare. Sundays, 7 p.m. on Plus TV Africa.
How can we have peace without justice?
Plus Politics. It's not just another political conversation, it's about keeping you in the know. The relevant interviews, asking the tough questions to those that matter. Get the answers you need. Does it mean that the people who were injured, people who were shot at, those who were involved in that stampede are not going to get justice?
It is unfortunate, it is sad that we have a government of deaf and dumb.
Analysis from top experts.
The last election was not really an election.
We feel that Obasanjo has a very special place in his heart for hating Ijaw people.
I think it really boils down to two things. One, trust and accountability.
Plus Politics.
The challenge businesses face is how to filter through the noise and identify where their ideal customers exist. Get insight and practical steps from industry players and captains of industries. Hear success stories to help you make informed decisions as you scale your business in Nigeria. Watch Business Insights at this time on Plus TV.
I didn't believe that until you say a white man or you
get better. Where do you?
Hey, what's up, guys? You're welcome to another edition of Plus Event, and I remain your host, Ifeoluwa Oshukeye.
Your absence isn't an excuse anymore, as Plus Events is all you need, as we bring you the glitz, the glamour, and loads of fun.
Oh, definitely, by no question. He's a living legend.
Yo, what's up, my people? It's your boy Starboy Terry. You're watching
Plus Event on Plus TV.
Stay glued to Plus TV Africa every Saturday and Sunday, 4:30 p.m. West African time.
Nigeria, by extension, Africa, is faced with a lot of challenges. The growing youth population with little engagement, that is a ticking time bomb. We are a blessed people with diverse culture and highly cerebral minds who have a lot to say. And yes, we are talking. It is important we drive the right conversation that informs, inspires, influences thought and action. If we say there's beauty in our diversity, then let us embrace our diverse culture. We must continue to courageously be the voice of transformation, as we are the hope for the future. Yesterday's conversations shape today. What are you saying to shape your tomorrow? We know you have a lot to say, and we are here to hear you.
If it's all in trending in the entertainment industry, then we'll definitely be talking about
5:30 p.m.
Also, influence peddlers.
You are sitting on Nigerians' money.
From the barbing, I pay my rent. From the barbing, I send my children to school.
Equally.
Welcome back to The Breakfast and Plus TV Africa. We're heading straight to looking at our major conversation on the show, the supplementary budget. And of course, we do have an economist who will join the conversation. But a little bit of background to what is actually happened following the suspension of fuel subsidy policy. President Muhammadu Buhari has transmitted the 2022 Appropriation Act Amendment Bill to the National Assembly. Now, the president is seeking approval from the National Assembly, the sum of 2.557 trillion naira supplementary budget for petrol subsidy from July 2022 to December 2022. And this is as a result of the U-turn to stop the subsidy by June. The highlights of the 2022 Appropriation Amendment Bill includes asking the National Assembly to review the Finance Act 2021 to restore the provision made for various key capital projects in the 2022 executive proposal that were cut by the National Assembly, and to reinstate the 25.81 billion naira cut from the provision for the power sector reform program in order to meet the federal government's commitment under the financing plan agreement with the World Bank. Others are to reinstate the 4 capital projects totaling 1.42 billion naira in the executive proposal for the Federal Ministry of Water Resources that were removed in the 2022 Appropriation Act, among others. I mean, the list is almost endless. But we do have Ogbonlaho Olojide, who is an economist who joins the conversation this morning. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
All right, so let's talk about this now. To share your thoughts, despite the fact that we are financially challenged, I mean, looking at that, we're going to be spending 22% of the 2022 budget on debt servicing, which reflects that we do not have the capacity to actually meet our financial demands. It means that we will be servicing our 2022 budget by debt, and that's what it means. We're here now looking at the supplementary budget of 2.577 trillion naira. What do you make of this?
Well, it's the choice we have made. Apparently, I think the politicians have succeeded in pushing us in this direction. In the real sense of it, there is no politician who wants to remove fuel subsidy in an election season, because they know that if you remove it, there will be all sort of protest and outcry, and it might affect their own prospect in the election. So what a politician will naturally enjoy is money to be able to spend, not protest. Nobody wants a protest. So when we pass the PIA, and part of the PIA also include the deregulation of the downstream, when we got to the junction where we're supposed to make a decision, we are unable to make that decision. So we pushed ourselves in the direction of what the politician wants, which is to have money to spend. So since you don't want first subsidy, that's fine. Let's make provision to spend money on first subsidy, since you don't want to remove the subsidy. Then let's make provision. Essentially, what we're going to be doing is that we will be borrowing this 2.557 trillion, and then we will share it among ourselves in the name of subsidy. That's what we want, since we are unable to come to the table and have a honest discussion around fuel subsidy. We think it is a you versus me and we versus them kind of situation. We're not at that point where we're seriously ready to address this matter, and that is where we're heading now.
Mr. Olojide, let's look at the fact that we're in the situation because, we don't have refining capacity. Of course, yes, we know the government has told us they're rehabilitating or renovating, whichever it is, the Port Harcourt refineries, and then the Warri and Kaduna refineries will be done subsequently. But if we look at the fact that $15 billion is expected to be the amount of the cost of building the Dangote refinery, and that amounts to about 6.2 trillion naira. Shouldn't we just be taking this money we use every year for fuel subsidies and probably just give it to the private sector and say, take and build a refinery and then give us a stake, or add this to what you want to build a refinery with? Because this money could be used for that, so we don't have to import fuel and then worry about the whole subsidy and all that.
Unfortunately, government cannot just dole out money like that to the private sector. The role of government is to create the right environment for private money to come into that space. And I think there has an element of that, which is why today we have the Dangote refinery, which was meant to have come on stream earlier, but unfortunately has not been able to get operational. According to information, by the end of quarter three this year, it should go live. And like you mentioned, government has also awarded the revamp. In April last year, it awarded Port Harcourt refineries. In August, it awarded both Kaduna and Warri refineries. This is all in a bid to get refining capacity in the mix. There's also there's an illusion side of things about how fuel will become very cheap once we start to refine. It is an illusion, and it's important that we get that out of our minds totally. It is not, refining inside the country has its own advantage or advantages. It stimulates the economy, it creates jobs, there are a whole lot of multiplier effect that will create. But one of the things it will not create is cheap fuel. It doesn't mean that because we're not refining inside, fuel will now become 100 naira per liter. It's not about to happen. What we will have is what I would call a relatively cheaper fuel, because the cost, the importation logistic cost, so you pay for shipping, there is clearing and whatever, all those costs will not be there. So there will be a marginal decrease in what the price should be. But it is not all those dreamy 150 naira. No. That's not what we're going to have.
But Mr. Lodede, you know, it's a resource. If the federal government is spending this amount of money to import fuel and also to subsidize the fuel imported, it means that they can subsidize without necessarily doling out money. In other words, if they're able to refine in this country, either through the federal government-owned refineries or through refineries done with federal government shares in them, they may be able to find it easier to give us a significantly cheaper fuel, you know, compared to marginally, you're saying, you know.
That is the point. It is not going to be a significantly cheaper fuel. The only cost we will save is the importation logistic cost. So you ship crude. If you are doing a swap, so there's a cost of shipping the crude to the refiner, and then a cost of shipping it back to the country. There will be some clearing charges and all the rest. That is what we're going to save. All this matter may not be more than 10%, or let's play an extreme lock and say 15% reduction. It is significant if you look at it, but it is far away from what people are envisaging, that once we start refining, this oil will come cheap. No, it is the cost of refining that will still go into what price we're going to pay. So there's still the price of the crude, there is the overhead of the refiner, and several other things that will go into that to determine what is the final cost to the consumer.
So
we have right now.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So if we have this over 2 trillion naira being set aside to fund the subsidy, what do you say about the fact that it's costing about $15 billion, 6.2 trillion naira to build the Dangote refinery? Out of that, the federal government is farming out 4 billion naira to buy shares and to support this building through the NNPC. Should we not just be taking the bullet and saying, know what, we're ending this, we can take this money, instead of using it to subsidize every year, we can take this money and ensure that we can have our own fuel refined in Nigeria?
You see, I'm going to be frank with you. The way we have approached the matter of fuel subsidy, rightly so, is to think that it is a we versus them situation, the people versus the government. And there's a justification for that. That issue has its roots in the trust capital between the government and the people. So the people are disillusioned because over and over again, government has promised and has not delivered. There has been a lot of deceit in that space. So these are the things that are making it appear as if on a solution that is going to be a compromise for everybody. It is not to think that we can fundamentally change that space without some bit of pain is a deceit. So if all the stakeholders are sitting across the table and we're willing to discuss honestly, we cannot come up with a solution that will work for us as a country. But if we decide to play this we against them, this is what we're going to have. They say, oh, let's remove fuel subsidy. No, you cannot remove subsidy. Okay, since you don't want us to remove subsidy, we will be paying this much as subsidy. So they are putting us in between the...
What it means, we have to borrow to fund the budget. Where will the Nigerian government get 2.557 trillion?
I said it. We will be borrowing it and sharing it as subsidy.
So what will be the implication for the economy and the Nigerian people? When does this leave the people?
The implication is that we're digging a deeper hole. Right now, we're still managing to maneuver our way through the maze. Over the next few months, if we go along the same line, borrowing 2.557 trillion and sharing it as subsidy, we will get to a point we won't be able to pay salaries. All the federal workers and all that, we won't be able to fund anything in this one. We are going to bring this country under a debt overhang. We won't be able to move forward. In fact, at some point, the creditors will start becoming unwilling to give Nigeria an additional penny. We don't have to go to that length. We don't have to drag ourselves to that junction.
It seems the economic policy of this government, federal government in Nigeria, led by President Muhammadu Buhari, is the policy or the model they are operating is simply borrow money to solve your problems.
But they also remember
pump money into the economy if sectors need money and keep pumping. And now we're hearing that they won't be giving the commercial deposit money banks any FX. So this model of borrowing, you say it drives into a grid.
From the government. There are two ways to look at these things. One is what you call your debt to GDP. When you look at the debt to GDP of Nigeria, it is fantastic. We are well within the range of what we should be borrowing. In fact, we are not borrowing nearly enough at all if it is debt to GDP you're looking at. But here is the problem. Nobody repays debt from GDP. You repay your debt from revenue. So what we should be looking at is not just debt to GDP, which the government is emphasizing, but the debt to the revenue. According to the IMF, in 2022, Nigeria will be spending 92% of its actual revenue servicing debts. 92. That is the projection of the IMF. So when you look at the revenue side of things, it is horrible. It is abysmal. But if you want to play on, trying to comfort the people that we are still doing okay, then you lean on the debt to GDP ratio. The problem of Nigeria is that it has a huge GDP, but it has been unable to translate that GDP into a sizable revenue. The GDP of South Africa is smaller than that of Nigeria. But when you look at the revenue size of South Africa, it's about 4 times what Nigeria budgets every year. So you need to ask yourself, revenue, you know there's a crisis. Borrowing an additional 2.5.
Some will say one of the ways to increase revenue or reduce expenditure is actually to reduce your expenditure, especially another time to discuss this with you. Our economy is concerned.
This Medan has been directed to empower 1,000 persons with disabilities in each state in the next 12 months.
When I start hearing the shoot of guns.
Whatever I've done.
Every public policy has winners and losers, and some will not be very happy with you, while others, usually the silent majority, will be quite happy.
What we do not understand, we will stigmatize.
What you can see is the remaining of the tanker that exploded.
He suffered equally confessed.
A 500 naira they collect them.
If you no talk, then go beat you.
Now 2,500 they pay.
how long are we going to be, singing the same song? Can't the citizenry see up till now that the power is in their hands and that they need to take a hold of it and do what they need to do to change the status quo?
It's the hypocrisy, right? The hypocrisy that comes to not paying attention in this case to the things that really matter to us.
Not everybody can get that job in government. Not everybody has the opportunity to get that job in business. So until we can give the businesses, the small, medium and big businesses, the opportunity to thrive to the highest level,
yes,
we will not get to that stage.
In Nigeria, we don't have an election, we have a selection.
Selection.
So they just present the devil and the blue sea, and you must make a choice. And this is because we are not part of political parties, or we're not doing anything. So what happens is we just roll with the wind.
Nigeria's Niger Delta region, from where the black gold fuels Africa's largest economy, where the lines between wealth and poverty has never been thinner. Conflicts, poverty, insecurity, and environmental challenges daily confront the region. How can the Niger Delta story be changed for the better?
Join Mamude Akuga at 9 p.m. every Friday evening on PlusTvAfrica as he probes deep in search of solutions.
Inside the Niger Delta with Mamude Akuga, the authentic voice of Nigeria's oil-rich region.
Welcome back. You're still on to the breakfast on Plus TV Africa, and now to our second discussion. Some troops in Russia's military districts adjacent to Ukraine returned to their bases after completing drills. Russia's defense ministry was quoted by the Interfax news agency as saying a move that could de-escalate a friction between Moscow and the West. This comes following talks between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Now, speaking on Tuesday during a news conference, Putin said he is, quote, ready to work further with the West on security issues to de-escalate tensions over Ukraine, but emphasized the need for the West to heed Russia's main demands. But later on Tuesday, U.S. President Joe Biden cast doubt on Moscow's claims of a partial withdrawal, saying that 150,000 Russian troops near Ukraine remain in what he called a threatening position, warning that an invasion, quote, remains distinctly possible. End of quote. In a televised address from the White House on Tuesday afternoon, Biden combined a repeated offer of security talks with a warning of severe repercussions if Russia carries out its threat of an attack that the United States intelligence has reportedly assessed could take place as early as Wednesday. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier that Wednesday would be a day of unity for the country, urging people to fly flags and sing the national anthem at 10 a.m. Russia has always denied planning to invade Ukraine, saying it can exercise troops on its own territory as it says sees fit. It has been pressing for a set of security guarantees from the West, including a guarantee that Ukraine will never join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Now, what do these developments mean for the situation between Russia and Ukraine? Joining us to analyze this is Dr. Kach Onunuju. He is an international affairs analyst. Dr. Onunuju, thanks for joining us. Nice to have you.
Thank you for having me.
The United States intelligence has put it out, and President Joe Biden has televised a speech addressing the world, and they believe that Russia will either invade Ukraine today or will throw missiles into Ukraine today. You heard from the intro there that Russia has pulled out some troops from that, what it calls a mere training exercise after Putin met with the German Chancellor. Do you believe that the U.S. intelligence report is true and should be held on to?
there are quite a lot of things going on. For a very long time right now, there are crises in Ukraine, an internal civil war in Donetsk and Lubyaνα. So you need to look at that. And those are separatist people fighting to link themselves to Russia. It's been going on for a very, very long time. The question is, what did Europe do all along while this war raged on? Okay? And what is the intention of the West on long term? Don't forget the Cuban Missile Crisis. America couldn't accept that Russia should have an ally on its border, and on the issue of Russian demand for guarantees in regards to Ukraine, of course, yes, we know internationally, you cannot tell a country not to belong to a committee of friends it feels very comfortable with. But I am aware also that President Biden has stated openly to the Russians, the NATO is not their enemy, and they do not have an intention of putting arsenal and armaments on the Russian border. They don't have any intention of bringing Ukraine into NATO very quickly. So what is the problem? This issue is not going to go away. There are guarantees that Russia seeks. Those guarantees look very, very difficult, yet they are not very possible for us to respect. If Russia does, as everybody fears, invade Ukraine, what will happen? No, I don't know. It could change human history because of the war, but I also believe nothing also may happen. One, they've taken Crimea. What has happened? Nothing. And they've massed their troops on the borders between Ukraine and Belarus, and also on the Russian border with Ukraine. And that's gotten everybody very, very angry and jittery. So I believe we must not break the long-term engagement with Russia. And I believe that engagement has not been given the kind of relationship and strength and commitment it deserves. Why do I say this? The ongoing crisis in Russia did not start today. The crisis inside Ukraine didn't start today. The civil war in Lubyaana and Donetsk did not start today. What did Europe do? Why did Europe not all along find a way to try to ameliorate and bring peace, to do what they are doing right now, yesterday, in order to bring peace in Donetsk and in Lubyaana? So it's only now that we are all beginning to scream as if this crisis just started yesterday. It didn't start yesterday. It's been on for a very long time. What did the world do all along? The world didn't do anything. And now we're screaming about what Russia wants to do. I think the Ukraine issue, for as far as I'm concerned, is a conundrum. How will it be resolved? I do not know. But I also believe, I don't see a major crisis coming out of Ukraine. I believe the West will advise Ukraine to go gently. I believe the West will find a way, because now you have Russian separatists, Russian-speaking people in Ukraine fighting an internal civil war for a very long time. What have we done? We need to look at that. Solve the crisis in Donetsk and Lubyaana if you want to solve the Ukrainian crisis. So I believe.
Well, Dr. Kacho Nunuju, the United States has been accused of trying and backing the Ukraine in this crisis that's ongoing. And some people are saying that the United States has a personal interest to achieve. As you can actually see track records in the Middle East, you see that in Yemen, Africa, according to this school of thought. They say that the US is strongly behind, and because they have an interest in Russia.
Well, not just having interest in Russia. US is not very comfortable with Russia's move, even with Germany. Look at the way everybody wants to link the Nord Stream 2 to the crisis. If the Nord Stream 2 goes through and Russian gas gets deep into Europe, you cannot recall that. That means Russia will become permanently embedded into the energy needs of Western Europe. I don't see you removing that. So on the long term, everybody should be careful how they play with Russia in regard to Ukraine. Now, there is nothing too much if the Russians beg you, don't bring NATO to our borders. And I believe if Russians believe that the West, the United States, seem to want to use the hyping of there will be an invasion issue as a strategy to bring its weapons and troops into Ukraine, they could precipitate a Russian action, could not be good for the international order. I believe that is the game. And that's why I have seen and I feel encouraged that President Biden is making public commitments through his speeches that the United States and NATO do not have any intention of bringing troops there, of bringing armaments there on the Russian border, that means in Ukraine. I do not know what they are going to do because right now, as we say of the Russian bear, it actually is powerfully bringing down the neck of Ukraine. You can see what's going on. So on both sides, yesterday, Russia said they have removed some of their troops that went there for the military drill. And I believe that to be a payback to the efforts of President Macron. And I thank President Macron for that. But on the long term, this crisis is just starting. So what we're beginning to argue about is...
We seem to be having a network issue with Mr. Kautunuju. Dr. Nuju, can you hear us, please?
Russian Federation. And a lot of those armaments are there. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. For those who are wondering, trying to understand the situation, can you tell our viewers why Russia has a problem with Ukraine joining the North Atlantic Treaty Organization? Why it feels threatened by that, possibility?
Well, one, the way the Soviet Union was arranged, each nation had capabilities increased and strengthened in places where they think they have advantage. In the old Soviet USSR, apart from modern Russia, Ukraine was the country where a lot of the military equipment were being done, as you've seen, like it happened in Crimea. That was also part of Ukraine. Russia has taken that back. So there were quite a lot of things that Russia believes that it needs Ukraine for, and it doesn't want Ukraine in the hands of the what do you call it?
The West.
The NATO alliance.
Okay.
And that's why I believe what may allow Ukraine to remain as an independent country. Don't drag Ukraine into NATO. If you try that, you will have a Russian reaction. That is what I believe all of us should work towards. Don't try to get Ukraine into NATO. Don't also try to get Russia irritated by seeing equipment, armaments, and troops from other countries put into Ukraine. Whatever it is you want to do to help Ukraine, let it be through diplomatic relationship and negotiations with Russia. If not, Russia may be forced. At least they have shown that they have no problem invading Ukraine from Belarus or invading Ukraine from the Russian border.
But
so
Mr.
we must play just...
Yeah, Dr. Noju, this is interesting, the fact that you've said, Ukraine is sandwiched in between Belarus and Russia, and the dynamics of the history of the USSR with the Ukrainian, region involved in USSR and all that. But let's look at the mass of troops on the border between Russia and Ukraine. Some school of thought would say this is just a strategic deterrence, going back to what happened between Cuba and the United States of John F. Kennedy, where you had those missiles pointed facing the United States of America from Fidel Castro's camp, ready to fire. But that was all in the bid to ensure that. Do you think? Yeah, but do you think they're doing this to just make the change the minds of the NATO allies and to encourage them to step back a bit and say, hey, we are here, but they don't really mean to start going to Ukraine?
Well, they will ultimately step back. Russia has shown them reasons why they should step back. Nobody can try that. Don't forget, you're talking about the area that has the Sebastopol port, the area with Crimea, the area with nuclear submarines and nuclear warheads. You don't want to go there and go to a fight. You don't want to do that for the sake of the world, because if anything goes wrong in Ukraine, it will change the world history.
Okay, just as we close the conversation down, now with all of this, we know that the world is a global village. COVID-19 has actually showed that in different pandemics that we have experienced. Will this actually impact, I mean, with the ongoing crisis right now, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, is there any impact on the globe and on Africa? And peradventure, you know, Russia decides to invade Ukraine or the other way, what will be the impact on the entire globe and Africa and Nigeria as it were? I mean, we've been making light jokes behind the scene, talking about missile getting to some parts of the world.
Well, if there is a global configuration, of course, everybody gets affected, everybody gets involved, but we don't want that. I believe the immediate impact of a crisis will be the realignment of forces and alliances. Right now, we're already hearing about Russia and China being very sweet with themselves. I don't think the United States like that. So you don't want to play up those things that will suddenly make those who are with Russia to stand up and take positions against you. So we need to go very gentle, manage this, de-escalate it. De-escalate it. We do not need any crisis in the Ukraine. And don't forget, if you look at the map, which you're showing, you will see that Ukraine is like a very small province, right up there beside Russia. If the West now think they will go there and then have a base, the US must consider how it felt when the Russians came to Cuba and tried to put a base there. The US didn't allow it. So whatever it is that the US didn't want Russia to do in Cuba, the US should in turn consider they should not be seen to be doing the same thing in the Ukraine. If it does it, you're going to have crisis.
Interesting, very interesting analysis from you, Kachi and Raju, where we'll get to see what happens. Thank you very much for your time. I think Mercy's last question was born out of fear. Maybe she feels some missiles will land in Nigeria. But it reminds us of, you know, the Operation Desert Storm. I think, no, not Desert Storm, but the first war between America and the first Gulf War, you know, when George Bush Sr. was in charge. And then I remember as a youngster in Nigeria, we're thinking that Saddam Hussein was going to throw some weapons of mass destruction in Nigeria. So to see helicopters flying over, you know, military, will think, oh, that's Saddam Hussein. You know, so I know where Mercy is coming from. But thank you very much for your time, Dr. Kachi and Raju.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate your time.
All right. Mercy, you can rest easy. We're safe.
Well, you never can tell what happens. These weapons are very sophisticated. But we pray that, you know, crises don't happen. And apart from that, we're hoping that all of the relevant
let's worry about the fuel situation. Let's leave.
No, because it would affect everybody, however you see it. Well, that's the size of the conversation. If you missed out on any part of it, it's all right to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. We're at PlusTvAfrica and PlusTvAfrica Lifestyle on YouTube. Do not forget to subscribe. I am Mercy Bokpo. Have a fantastic Wednesday.
And I'm Kofi Bartels. We return tomorrow. Good morning.